Welcome back to our channel. One dime sold for more than a car. These rare coins could be hiding in your change. Like and subscribe. In the shadows of a transforming nation, as the world adjusted to post-war economies and America recalibrated its currency standards, a quiet change stirred behind the roaring headlines of the 1960s. It was 1965, and the United States Mint found itself at a crossroads. Silver was becoming too costly to sustain its place in common coinage. The Coinage Act of that year marked a significant departure from tradition, replacing silver in dimes, quarters, and half dollars with clad compositions. In that quiet shift, errors were born, not from incompetence, but from the storm of sudden change. The 1965 U.S. dime was meant to usher in this new era. No longer composed of 90% silver, it was struck in a copper-nickel clad composition, layered upon a copper core. These coins were produced in mass, without mint marks, as the Philadelphia Mint alone shouldered the burden of production. Under pressure to meet demand and phase out silver dimes, the transition became ripe for human error and machine miscalculation. Among the millions churned out under fluorescent lights and relentless machines, a handful resisted conformity. One such dime found its way, decades later, into the palms of an unsuspecting collector named Henry. A quiet man, the kind who spent his Saturdays at flea markets and estate sales, who flipped through coin rolls like others turned pages in books. It was at a dusty antique shop outside Flagstaff that Henry first saw it, innocuous in appearance, resting within a jar of loose change. Something about its soft luster drew his attention. He picked it up, rolled it between his fingers. It had the faint weight of something different. Not heavier, but denser somehow, as if history itself had soaked into the metal. He didn't realize it at first. That came much later, when under his usual desk lamp and with a loupe in hand, he noticed what the sunlight in the shop had masked. The coin had no clad layers exposed along its rim, just a uniform silver edge, solid through and through. He tilted it, studying its reeded edge, comparing it with others. It didn't match. This dime didn't belong in the world of copper-nickel. It whispered of a time just missed, a ghost of the previous era. Henry's pulse quickened. He knew enough to suspect, but not enough to conclude. He weighed it, 2.5 grams, heavier than the 2.27 grams of standard 1965 clad dimes. The scale didn't lie. Silver dimes, the pre-1965 kind, carried that weight. Yet the date on this coin was clear, 1965. That shouldn't exist. There were no silver dimes minted that year, at least not officially. He couldn't sleep that night. The dime rested beneath his pillow like a secret, and it occupied his thoughts like a mystery unsolved. By morning, he was on the phone with a numismatic expert, someone he'd met at a coin show years earlier. The man's voice tightened over the line as Henry described the coin. He asked for photos, measurements, specific gravity. Days passed in a quiet storm of anticipation. And then the verdict came, not a forgery, not a fluke of discoloration, but a genuine mint error. A 1965 silver dime. What had happened, the expert explained, was likely the result of a transitional error. Blank silver planchets from 1964 had been mistakenly fed into the presses alongside the new copper-nickel ones. As the mint scrambled to introduce the clad coins, a few silver blanks were left behind, slipping through the transition like time travelers lost in the shuffle of chronology. Henry was stunned. Not only had he found something rare, he'd uncovered a known error type that had haunted collectors with its elusive existence. For years, whispers had circulated of such dimes. Some dismissed them as myths. Others believed they had seen one in circulation, but couldn't prove it. Now Henry held the proof, cold and metallic, warm with significance. The value of the coin was the last thing on his mind in those first days. He was enthralled by the discovery itself. But as word spread in quiet channels, emails among collectors, murmurs in online forums, a nod from a well-known numismatic publication, the market began to murmur back. Offers emerged, first modest, then increasingly aggressive. One dealer suggested $500. Another hinted at $1,000. Henry, overwhelmed, hesitated. He wasn't ready to let go. The coin was not just rare, it was a symbol. A symbol of a shift in monetary history, a tangible artifact of a chaotic moment when modern coinage met its uncertain beginning. And as more examples surfaced, perhaps a dozen over the following years, scattered across the nation, the true rarity began to solidify. These were not coins struck for collectors, not commemoratives or proofs. They were accidental survivors of an industrial revolution in miniature. Prices began to climb. At auction, verified 1965 silver dimes sold for figures that raised eyebrows: $5,000 here, $9,000 there. Condition mattered, of course. Mint state examples fetched higher bids, but even circulated ones drew attention. Their value was in the story they told. Henry watched as his once overlooked coin transformed in public perception, from anomaly to treasure. He held onto it for a long time, turning down offers, refusing to let the market dictate his decision. He was a collector, not a trader. Yet curiosity never left him. He studied every auction listing, every article, every confirmed sale. And then came the twist. During a private symposium of elite collectors in New York, a researcher presented findings that rattled the accepted narrative. The number of 1,965 silver dimes confirmed in collections was fewer than previously thought. Many had been misattributed, clad coins with unusual toning, or altered edges. A new method of testing using X-ray fluorescence revealed only a handful were true 90% silver. This reclassification narrowed the field dramatically. From an estimated 20 examples, the number dropped to 7. 7 dimes in existence, each the result of a procedural error that lasted only hours, maybe minutes. Each one had survived decades in pockets, drawers, vending machines. Some were lost forever. Others, like Henry's, had waited for the right eyes to see them. Henry's coin had been certified by that point, graded MS-64 by a top-tier service, labeled as a transitional silver planchet error. When one of the other 6 sold for nearly $17,000, he understood the path his coin had traveled was nearing its crescendo. The offers returned, more persistent, more refined. A museum reached out. A private investor followed. One even proposed a trade, a rare 19th-century gold coin, plus cash, but Henry still hesitated, not out of greed, but reverence. The coin had become a part of his journey, a token not just of monetary history, but of the thrill that collectors live for. The chase. The moment when dust and shine intersect and yield something truly rare. The design of the coin itself, the familiar Roosevelt profile, remained unchanged. But its composition made all the difference. While millions of 1965 dimes clinked with the hollow echo of copper-nickel, Henry's rang with the clarity of silver. A sound almost forgotten by a generation. That sound became, in collector circles, a signature. Some had trained themselves to hear the difference in coin rolls, hunting silver by tone. Yet what made Henry's coin truly unique was not just its metal, but its context. It came not from a proof set, not from special minting, but from error, pure, unscripted error. A leftover blank slipped in, unnoticed, undocumented. And it had passed through the world unnoticed for years. Perhaps it had bought a soda, paid a toll, been dropped in a couch, or kicked beneath a dryer. It had lived a quiet, pedestrian life before fate set it on a path to significance. And then came another twist, another discovery, this one not by Henry, but by a young collector in Ohio. A 1965 dime struck on a 1964 Canadian silver planchet. The weight was slightly off, but the silver content confirmed. This introduced a new variable, not just leftover U.S. silver blanks, but foreign ones possibly mixed in. The implications rippled through the numismatic world. If cross-border blanks were used, the number of error combinations from that chaotic minting era might be broader than imagined. Suddenly, the 1965 dime wasn't just a coin. It was a symbol of systemic vulnerability, a glimpse into the pressure and imperfection of the minting process during upheaval. Each error dime wasn't just a mistake, it was a window into a system stretched thin, improvising under demand. For Henry, this revelation added yet another layer to his coin's identity. Its value wasn't just in silver, but in story. Each new discovery redefined what his coin represented, not diminishing its worth but enriching it. He began writing a journal, documenting everything: the find, the experts, the offers, the market shifts. The coin had given him more than potential profit. It had given him a voice in a world he once admired from the sidelines. In time, Henry would pass the coin on, not to the highest bidder, but to his niece, a student of history who shared his quiet fascination with the past. He told her not what it was worth, but why it mattered. He told her to keep it close, not because it was rare, but because it reminded him that the smallest objects can carry the greatest stories. That in a world of mass production, sometimes the flaws hold the most truth. The 1965 silver dime remains, even now, a coin of mystery and marvel. It challenges assumptions, rewards vigilance, and captivates those patient enough to see beneath the surface. In its simple face, struck in haste and passed in anonymity, lies the pulse of an era, and the enduring chase of those who seek to understand it. As the final decade of the 20th century unfolded, the United States had grown accustomed to precision in its currency production. Technology had evolved, minting practices were streamlined, and quality control had become a fortified checkpoint against the chaos of error. But perfection, as history always reminds us, remains an illusion. In the hum of machines and flashes of presses, even the most sophisticated systems can let the unexpected through. The 1996 US one-dime coin, at first glance, belonged firmly to the realm of the ordinary, yet something curious managed to escape unnoticed, a mistake masked in the mundane. The year 1996 marked the 50th birthday of Franklin D. Roosevelt's presence on the dime. The U.S. Mint issued billions of dimes that year, primarily from Philadelphia and Denver, each one a near clone of the other, indistinguishable in casual glance, exchanged daily in vending machines, purses, and register tills. But in that ocean of uniformity, a small number of these coins would one day leave collectors baffled. One, in particular, would spark a quiet storm of excitement. It did not scream for attention, it whispered with subtle peculiarity. In the quiet corner of a Michigan suburb, a young collector named Daniel sifted through a fresh roll of dimes from his local bank. His habits were steady: sort, inspect, compare, catalog. To others, it may have seemed tedious, but to Daniel, it was ritual, a daily meditation. That afternoon, a single coin stood out. Not because of its shine or wear, but because of how it sat in his hand. The edges were duller, the diameter slightly smaller, and the weight, imperceptibly light. Still, he almost dismissed it. It wasn't until he tested the dime on a digital scale that the alarm quietly triggered. A standard 1996 dime should weigh 2.27 grams. This one weighed closer to 1.8. That shouldn't be possible. He examined it more closely. The design was clear: Roosevelt's profile, the 1996 date, no mint mark. But the thickness seemed reduced, the edge too smooth, almost incomplete. It had the feel of a coin that shouldn't have made it out of the mint. Daniel placed it beside other dimes from the same year. One by one, he observed the differences. The font was the same. The strike, almost identical. But his mystery coin had a slight shift in the alignment. Something subtle but off. The rim was partially missing, and the planchet seemed underweight. Could it be a misstrike? A wrong planchet? The possibilities began to pulse in his mind. He reached out to a few trusted voices in the numismatic world. Some replied with cautious interest, others with veiled excitement. They asked for images, then requested high-resolution scans. A specialist responded with a theory: a 1996 Roosevelt dime struck on a foreign planchet. It had happened before, but rarely. Some planchets from other world currencies, possibly from a coin destined for Latin America or Southeast Asia, had occasionally found their way into U.S. presses due to blank stock mixing or inventory mismanagement. The idea seemed outrageous at first. But further analysis confirmed the suspicion. The planchet was from a 10-centavo coin from South America, nickel-clad, lighter, and just undersized enough to slip into the dies without being detected. The U.S. Mint, after all, used multiple international blank suppliers. In the 1990s, with globalization expanding and production running at speed, it was not impossible for such an accident to occur. Daniel's coin was born from that rare storm of circumstances. Suddenly, this dime was not just different, it was unique. Only a handful of such wrong planchet errors from 1996 had ever been verified. Some had appeared in auctions and fetched notable prices, but many were still unconfirmed, lost in change jars or slipped unknowingly through generations. This one was certified after metallurgical testing and careful grading. The coin's surface showed clear signs of being struck with standard Roosevelt dies but on a foreign blank. The reverse rim lacked full formation due to the smaller diameter, and the denticles were barely visible. Yet, the devices, the torch, olive branch, oak branch, were there, albeit softly imprinted. Daniel didn't sell it immediately. He studied its story, learned about others like it, and followed the faint trail of similar errors through auction catalogs, forum discussions, and old mint-era reports. He discovered that several 1996 dimes had surfaced on Philippine 5-centimo blanks, while others were believed to be struck on blanks intended for Canadian or Central American coins. Some were copper-based, others clad, all anomalies with subtle differences. The prices varied wildly, depending on the type of blank and the condition of the strike. Some had sold for $13,000. Others, more cleanly struck, had passed $20,000. But Daniel's coin had something special. It was a full strike, centered, date visible, no mint mark, with both obverse and reverse details remarkably clear for a wrong planchet error. Experts whispered that its condition made it one of the finest known of its kind. Rumors of similar coins had never been confirmed at this level of clarity and preservation. His dime became a quiet legend in small collector groups. A few major collectors reached out discreetly. Offers started in the low thousands. Then tens of thousands, but Daniel hesitated. This coin had taught him something about the unexpected nature of rarity. It reminded him that value in coin collecting often hides in places no one bothers to look. That the most unusual finds are sometimes in plain sight, disguised as everyday objects. He kept the dime stored in a temperature-controlled box, revisiting it occasionally, each time marveling at how something so small had generated such ripples of curiosity. Then came the twist he never saw coming. A second coin surfaced, this time from the Pacific Northwest. It bore the same date, same characteristics, but with a slight twist in the strike. It too had been struck on a foreign blank, confirmed by testing. But it was struck off-center, and the reverse was double impressed. While the original rarity of Daniel's coin held, this new example reignited interest in the 1996 dime errors as a whole. The numismatic world began to pay attention again, creating a mini-revival of discussions around transitional and foreign planchet errors. This renewed attention pushed prices higher. In a span of 3 years, several similar wrong planchet 1996 dimes sold privately and through auction houses. Each transaction became a subject of fascination and debate. How many existed? Was there a specific production line responsible? Had a shipment of planchets been mixed and gone unnoticed? The Mint, when asked, gave no formal confirmation, citing incomplete archival data from that period. Daniel watched all this unfold, knowing that his dime remained one of the finest documented examples. He had never submitted it to auction, but collectors speculated its value. One well-known dealer estimated it conservatively at $38,000. Another believed it could fetch as high as $110,000 at the right event. And still, Daniel held on. To him, the journey wasn't over yet. The dime continued to serve as a reminder that even in an era of precision and control, the unexpected can still slip through. Not as a flaw, but as a fascinating mark of history, this 1996 US 1 dime coin, ordinary in design, extraordinary in substance, had risen quietly from obscurity to become a numismatic enigma. Its value, now ranging between $38,000 and $110,000 depending on condition and provenance, reflects more than rarity. It embodies the thrill of discovery, the complexity of production, and the way a single coin can echo with stories far beyond its size. In the end, it proved that even in a decade of digitized accuracy, the past still finds ways to surprise us. By the time 2004 arrived, the world of American coinage seemed unshakably stable. The U.S. Mint had become a model of industrial precision, producing billions of coins with mechanical perfection. Technology had reduced human error, quality control had evolved, and systems were in place to detect nearly every flaw before it could escape into circulation. And yet, under the weight of such confidence, a quiet anomaly slipped past every checkpoint unnoticed. A 2004 U.S. one-dime coin, seemingly ordinary to the untrained eye, would slowly unravel a mystery that even the most seasoned collectors struggled to explain. In the early spring of 2012, nestled in the quiet hills of eastern Tennessee, a retired machinist named Ernest was sorting through a coffee can of loose change. It was the kind of thing he did often, not out of necessity, but out of habit. He'd always appreciated the details in small things, the ridges on coins, the grooves in a screw thread. That day, he wasn't expecting anything unusual. The dimes spilled onto his workbench, clinking against one another, their dates forming a blur of late 20th and early 21st century numbers, but then one coin paused him. A 2004 dime, slightly discolored, less shiny than the rest. It was worn, but there was something strange about it. Its surface looked uneven, almost smudged. The edges seemed slightly melted. Ernest picked it up and immediately noticed the weight. It felt off. He grabbed his old scale. The dime registered at 2.0 grams. That didn't make sense. A standard 2004 dime should weigh precisely 2.27 grams. The difference was slight, but it nagged at him. He took out a magnifier. What he saw next deepened the intrigue. The reverse side was struck with partial detail. The torch and branches appeared blurry, incomplete, as though they'd been stretched across the surface. The reeded edge wasn't quite right either, half of it looked flattened, the other half barely formed. The obverse was clearer, but even Roosevelt's profile seemed ghostly, as though it had been pressed into the coin with a strange reluctance. It was as if the coin itself had resisted being made. Ernest didn't consider himself an expert, but he wasn't new to coins either. He reached out to a local collector he'd met at a flea market years before. That man, intrigued by Ernest's findings, brought it to a regional coin show. Whispers followed. A few dealers shrugged it off, assuming it was post-mint damage. But others weren't so sure. It didn't look like a coin that had been mistreated. It looked like something that had been born wrong. After several opinions and consultations, the truth began to emerge. Ernest's dime wasn't damaged, it was an error coin, struck under conditions that were never supposed to happen. A metallurgical test revealed the key: the planchet wasn't standard copper-nickel. It was composed of an unusual nickel alloy not consistent with domestic coin production. The dime had likely been struck on a foreign planchet, perhaps intended for a coin from another country that used the same facilities or blank suppliers. That possibility opened a new realm of questions. How had a non-standard blank made it into the U.S. dime production line? 2004 wasn't a transitional year, and no change in metal composition was scheduled or recorded. The presses were supposed to be clean, their blanks verified. But the truth was clearer now: an error had happened. And Ernest's coin, the product of that momentary oversight, was now a mystery with monetary consequences. As the dime passed into the hands of professionals and was eventually authenticated, the full scope of its anomaly came to light. It was a 2004 Roosevelt dime struck on an undersized planchet, with a distinct alloy composition. But what truly set it apart was the strike itself. Both sides bore full dates and design elements, despite the mismatched size and metal. The mint had accidentally forced a standard dime die onto a non-standard planchet, resulting in an imperfect but complete coin. It was a perfect storm of misalignment, metal inconsistency, and minting error. The number of such dimes reported was extremely low. Only 3 others had been confirmed over the next few years, and each had minor differences in composition and detail. One was struck slightly off-center. Another had a blank reverse. But none had the clear full strike that Ernest's possessed. This rarity began to shape the coin's value, one auctioneer describing it as a textbook example of how unpredictable minting can still be in a digital age. Collectors began tracing the history of blank planchets used in U.S. mint facilities around 2004. Some speculation tied the alloy to a contract the mint had with an overseas supplier, hinting that a batch of blanks might have been incorrectly categorized or sorted. While the mint itself offered no official comment, internal reports suggested that mistakes of this kind, though rare, could happen when planchets of similar size were stored in adjacent inventories. Ernest watched all of this unfold with a mix of amusement and disbelief. The coin that had nearly gone into a soda machine had now been displayed at two national conventions. Dealers made offers. One tried to buy it outright for $12,000. Another suggested an auction would yield more. But Ernest waited. He wasn't in a hurry. For him, the discovery was more valuable than the payout. He enjoyed the ripple his coin had caused, the way it disrupted the predictable patterns of collecting. Then, just as attention around Ernest's dime began to settle, another twist emerged. A similar 2004 dime surfaced, but this one bore an additional error. It was struck on a planchet that appeared to be made of brass, giving the dime a golden hue. It was almost certainly intended for a foreign currency, likely a token or commemorative piece from an entirely different minting contract. This new find didn't diminish Ernest's coin, it magnified it. Now there was a pattern. A traceable thread of unusual planchets entering dime production during that period. What had once seemed isolated began to suggest something larger. A quiet mishap in mint logistics. A moment when material borders blurred just enough for oddities to be born. Market prices responded swiftly. Within a year, a 2004 dime struck on an experimental alloy sold for over $34,000. Another, worn but authenticated, fetched $27,000 in a private transaction. Ernest's coin, with its well-preserved strike and documented authenticity, was now viewed as one of the definitive specimens of this error type. Experts predicted that its value, depending on market conditions, collector interest, and visibility, would fall somewhere between $30,000 and $92,000. That range became more than just numbers, it symbolized the strange gap between what a coin was supposed to be and what it became. Ernest never expected to find value in a misprint, never imagined that a small disc of metal would draw such attention. But his dime stood as proof that even in the 21st century, when machines ruled the minting process and perfection was the promise, the unpredictable still slipped through. The 2004 Roosevelt dime wasn't designed to be rare. It was never meant to carry mystery. But in its unintended form, it became an object of fascination, a collector's puzzle, and a symbol of how even the most controlled systems can create the most curious errors. Its value continues to rise with each retelling of its discovery, each new collector who seeks out similar anomalies, each auction that features a new outlier. It serves as a reminder that the smallest imperfections can, sometimes, carry the greatest worth.